You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestall. Cara Cilento from 9 Lives Paranormal joins me on this episode to cover some of the locations in and around New Jersey. Cara and her co-author Gail Gamble's latest book, Out of the Darkness, Into the Light, covers the places and experiences they've shared with their love of the paranormal in Jersey. From abandoned asylums to cinemas, crash sites to lodges, New Jersey's overlooked hauntings are intriguing, to say the least. But before we join Cara, don't forget you can support Mysteries and Monsters by signing up at patreon.com/mysteriesandmonsters. $4 a month gets you ad-free episodes, guaranteed early releases, bonus content, and more. You can also click the link in the show notes, and thank you to each and every one of you that continue to support the show with your contributions every month. Thank you. You can find Mysteries and Monsters across most social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Mysteries and Monsters channel on YouTube. You can also visit mysteriesandmonsters.com for news and episodes, and you can also visit TeePublic for our exclusive merchandise store, and the link for that is in the show notes too. Our intro and outro music are performed by the marvellous Weary Pines. Thank you to Dean Bestall for his wonderful artwork, and the show is produced by Brennan Storr of the Ghost Story Guys. The Garden State's haunted locations await us in the company of 9 Lives Paranormal. New Jersey is our destination on today's episode, as I'm joined by Cara Cilento of 9 Lives Paranormal. In Cara and Gail's first book, Out of the Darkness, Into the Light, they share some of their personal histories that have guided them into the paranormal investigating realm. With some of their favourite hauntings, 9 Lives Paranormal take us to some overlooked locations. Cara, welcome to Mysteries and Monsters.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You are very welcome. I was delighted to read yours and Gail's book because as we were chatting prior to starting the interview properly, I think New Jersey, other than perhaps a couple of locations which seem to be quite notorious more for strange creatures running around in them than anything else.
Yes.
Most people would really struggle to think about a famous haunted location in New Jersey. And when I read your book, there was a couple of names that stood out to me that I've sort of heard on other shows and other investigators mention over the past. But for you living in New Jersey, are you a little bit surprised that the state seems to be so overlooked in the American paranormal world?
Yes, actually, I am. As we were discussing before, New Jersey has such a rich history in terms of wars, hospitals, organized crime, things like of that nature, Native American history, that these locations, like you said, besides the Pine Barrens, which they have the cryptids of the Jersey Devil, people are really struggling to put their finger on a place to say, oh, yes, that's a haunted place. I think in New Jersey local, if you were to ask people, they would be able to identify certain areas that do have the reputation of being haunted or have areas of high strangeness. But beyond, people really, really don't know what they're missing in terms of locations.
Well, I think that was what was refreshing about the book, because I think anybody, unless you're a sort of paranormal obsessive and go looking for them, your book is a perfect guide to some of New Jersey's strangest haunted locations. There seems to be a bit of everything going on. Also, what I love about the book is that you've got a bit of historical context in them, which also I think is one of those things, because you tend to, once again, people will focus on famous locations or certain cities or towns in New Jersey rather than some of these more lesser known places. And therefore, it's such a great book because it's part history, part paranormal investigation, obviously with yourself and Gail giving us a bit of your personal perspectives as well. Was it difficult not to try and tell us about all your favourite New Jersey hotspots, or were you kind of focused on these are our favourites and these are the ones we think we'd like to put forward?
These happen to be the ones that I feel would resonate more with a generalized audience, as opposed, to being my favorites. I have other places that I think are also, I don't want to use the word renowned, but they're remarkable to us. But I think these and the things I've walked away with and the hauntings and the impressions they left on me were the ones I think that would resonate with most people, not only in the paranormal community, but just the regular layperson who has not, witnessed any paranormal activity before. So, and that's really why I chose them. If I were to say, was I hard pressed in picking them? No, there are lots of people there and lots of areas in New Jersey that are haunted and have high strangeness. So I had a plethora to pick from. These were just picked by, I think, the relevancy to the general population of people who read, and want to know more about the hauntings.
So how did you get interested in this particular subject? Because I know, obviously, this is another interesting aspect of the book, that you're referring to your Italian heritage. And once again, I think even living in Europe, Cara, most people will struggle to talk about hauntings or the paranormal in Italian context, other than, once again, a couple of notable locations. And Italy is a place I've visited many times. I adore it. From the people, the food, the weather. It's a beautiful place. And I've been very fortunate to, visit Rome several times, and Venice and Turin.
Right.
And so I was really interested reading this, that when you talk about the paranormal in Europe, Italian culture tends to get overlooked. And yet, when you're talking about it in this book, it seems really fascinating that obviously we've still got these concepts that cross cultures, such as evil eyes and obviously protections and such. But obviously, do you think that's more to do with the fact that because Italy is the seat of Catholicism in the world, that people tend to focus on Rome and the Vatican City and exorcism perhaps more than some of the regional beliefs and the paranormal history of that particular area?
Yeah, I do. I think that in lack of a better word, it overshadows some of the cultures, across Italy and their belief systems and where, certain things came from. And the fact that my family immigrated here and we took some of those traditions and cultures, paranormal cultures, folklores, beliefs, however you will, and brought them here in our effort to assimilate within a new culture, we kind of glossed over them but still lived within them, if that makes sense, but didn't call it for what it was. If that kind of and when I talk to other friends who are also, European, we tend to laugh and commiserate over the fact, that we do have these beliefs that are rooted in paranormal historical context, paganism, if you will, old folk magic. And we laugh because, well, didn't you always burn an orange peel in your house? It's and we laugh and, but we didn't know what that meant, in terms of in the bigger historical context. And those little beliefs were pushed to the side for, say, Catholicism or other belief systems,
Yeah, I suppose as well, you've got that added situation as well, that obviously the northeast of America is well known for its large population of Italian immigrants who moved there at the late 18th and 19th centuries and across. And obviously New York and New Jersey are two hotbeds of American Italian culture. It's
correct.
Any idiot would know
knows.
that. Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's to do with the food or the culture or the history or the mafia or anything like that, it is rooted in that particular part of the States. And therefore, for many people, when you start talking about that, I suppose you've also not only got this attitude of Catholicism and religious beliefs, Cara, on top of it, you've got the Americanization of your culture becoming a sort of melting pot, which is, once again, another aspect of New Jersey, because you've had people come from all over the world and settle there, and then eventually, some would move further into the States or wherever. But obviously, Jersey is one of those places where you can walk down a street and you'll see 5 different restaurants from 5 different parts of Europe.
Right. Absolutely. And, and that's very central to here. I have friends, and Gail, even though she couldn't be here, Gail is from the Midwest, and she says when she moved here to New Jersey, she never saw anything like it in her life. Where you can walk down the street and we can have Portuguese restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, an Italian restaurant, a Turkish restaurant, an Ethiopian restaurant, all within like a block of each other, and all those cultures come here. And in terms of the paranormal, that I found, everybody brings something to the table from their past. And what are we doing when we have the paranormal, when we do paranormal investigations? We're bringing the past forward and we're giving it a voice. And when you have a multitude amount of people that have a cultural past, bringing it to the table and their historical belief system, it really puts together a rich history of perspective also, in terms of what we're all witnessing and sharing together in terms of a paranormal experience. And that's why I love it.
Yeah. It's very similar. I mean, Sheffield, where I live, has a very similar kind of melting pot culture, and I'm very fortunate to live in a very similar area, Cara, which the only downside I can say to something like that is it's not good for your waistline more than anything.
No.
You can eat around the world in a week.
No, you absolutely could. Yeah. Your caloric intake is horrible.
Absolutely. That's why you should always stick to the Mediterranean diets. Less chance.
Yeah, right.
Less chance of those calories building up on our hips, I think.
Absolutely.
So when did you get bit by the bug? Because I would imagine as well, because I've spoken to people in the past who've come from a sort of religious family or an upbringing that's very rooted in very stoic beliefs, Cara. Was it difficult? You had to have that duality of a religious sort of perspective and framework to the family and your culture as a New Jersey family, battling against an interest in the paranormal, or was it one of those things that you just got bit by the bug through personal experience and it's just developed as you've matured as a person?
Well, it's actually an interesting story. My family itself, growing up, was my father was more of an atheist growing up, and my mother was deeply religious. And everything that I did, I always liked things that were rooted in paranormal and things like that. As a young child, I was fascinated by the concept of UFOs, fascinated by the concept of Bigfoot, fascinated by the fact that there could be other dimensions. Fascinated. My father would feed into it, and my mother would send me to Catholic school. So
cleanse you
and let the nuns deal with it. That's what they let the nuns deal with it. But like I said in the book, there came that pivotal moment in the book with the Maloikia where I seemed to witness exactly the power of intention with the Maloikia. And when my mother thought that I was being influenced by something evil, let's call it for that, evil, and she brought faith into it, that's when I saw the hypocrisy and I started making all these other connections, coupled with the fact that where I grew up a mile and a half away from Overbrook Asylum, which is now condominiums. That's a whole other thing in itself. But I grew up in the shadow of a haunted location that was covered by some of the programs that are on TV to go into. But now, like I said, they've made it into condominiums. So growing up in the shadow of something that was rumored to have and found to have hauntings, understanding the hypocrisy of, yes, you were growing up in this Catholic household, but we believe in intention and, the evil eye and all this stuff, but we don't talk about that. It just grew inside of me, this journey of seeking it out even more. And what does it all mean? What does it mean in historical context? What does it mean in a cultural context? What does it mean to other people and these locations? Because if I'm growing up in this this line of believing in the paranormal and understanding that it could be out there, hence my mother's, way of dealing with the evil eye, then there has to be something to it. What happens when a location is on that cusp of paranormal, cultural, and history? What happens there? Because if I'm bearing witness to it, then what happens to the actual physical location that's bearing witness to it? And giving those locations, a voice and a way to communicate its own history.
Yes. I mean, I have to say, one of the things I've often found about haunted locations is, clearly, like yourselves, I love a bit of history, and I like to find out about a place. And as you say, this asylum has clearly got a very checkered past, as most asylums that were built in the 19th century would have, Cara, because patient care was not at the top of their agendas in those days. Right. Usually it was, how many people can we tie to a bed to keep them where they are for most of the time. I was absolutely stunned reading the book to read this story about when the boiler broke there during a cold snap, and they just left them there. And I just, you sometimes think, I mean, this is 100 years ago.
Correct.
And you just look at that and you think, were we that far away from caring for people that when a boiler breaks in an asylum with extremely vulnerable people in it, people just went, well, we'll get it fixed when we can get it fixed. And people froze to death.
Yeah. Hundreds froze to death, and you like to say that, we are much farther away from atrocities like that. But, every time in space has its own atrocity. And 100 years from now, people like us that are doing paranormal investigations are going to be looking back and be like, oh, my God, how did that happen? And then our story of those atrocities are going to be told. But, at least we hope so. At least we hope so. Yeah. And the lessons that are going to be learned by those people to bring forward, hopefully in another book. It's hopefully that's what I wish to impress upon people.
So when did you start going out and investigating things? As you say, you've got this love of the weird from being a very small child, very similar to myself, Cara. Was this one of those things where you kind of got together with some friends as a teenager and started exploring these things, or was it that you would be like some of us are? We would hear about a haunted location and we'd just stand outside it and go, "Ooh, that looks freaky. I wonder what goes on in there." Or was it that kind of thing where you just thought, "I want to go paranormal investigating. I'm going to jump in with both feet here"?
Well, I did it's a little bit of all of it. When I was younger and growing up in a very strict Italian household, I didn't get out much,
apart from seeing the nuns, yes.
Yeah, apart from seeing the nuns, yeah. I didn't get out much. But when I went away to college, I was the dormitory floor tarot card reader.
Right.
I spread my wings that way and started going into haunted locations on campus. I went away to college, and one of the dormitories was and the theater center. Why it's always the theater center, I don't know. But it always is, it's always like, go into the basement. Why? I don't know. It's the basement. Yes. Why is it the attic? I don't know. Not to be cliche, but it is. So I started going there with my friends in college and sharing experiences. And like I said, I became the floor tarot reader. I had my own tarot cards and all that. But then I started once after, believe it or not, COVID hit. The first thing I did, because I was home for 18 months, because the world shut down, I started delving into it even more on my own. Thank you, Internet. And I started to do paranormal tours that were being broadcast online, like Winchester House and stuff. And then as soon as it opened up, the first thing I did was go on a paranormal investigation, and I jumped in with both feet. The first thing I did is I went on a paranormal investigation. I went on a few of them. and then I started doing tours. I started working with people, working with at companies, and volunteering my time to do paranormal tours of haunted locations.
So, was 9 Lives Paranormal existing prior to the pandemic, or is this something that's come through that period of lockdown?
Because actually what happened was, after Gail and I were doing, I would mostly go with Gail. After Gail and I were doing investigations of locations and working for other different places that did paranormal toys, we said, we're going to do this ethically and we're going to do it responsibly. And that's how 9 Lives Paranormal actually started. Because when I started working for other investigative teams, and they were bringing the general public into these locations, I said, hold up, wait a minute. Are we training our staff? And are we honestly preparing people for what might happen when we go into some of these locations? You know, some people go in and they really have no idea what to expect and no idea on how it could possibly affect them. And I'm not talking negatively, I'm talking positively. I'm talking about what they're going to witness, if they witness anything at all, and how, you know, what that does to a person. Some people, I've seen people when they have witnessed something move on its own, from shock and awe to sheer terror. And people really don't know how it's going to affect them until it happens. So Gail and I formed 9 Lives Paranormal as not only a paranormal investigative team, but also as a safe space for people to have those experiences and talk about them, and also to educate people on what might happen and what to do with those feelings once they see something that most people don't see in their everyday lives. I mean, seeing, you know, like I said, people look at things moving, and, you know, myself, I'm like, oh, look at that, and I geek out, you know, where
Yes.
Some people need to bring a change of pants, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody's different.
You know, exactly. Everybody's different. So we designed 9 Lives Paranormal to be multifaceted, so that, you know, people can have their first experience in a very safe space, but also have the room to have those feelings and express them. You know, we've branched out, and we've decided that 9 Lives Paranormal also has room for everybody. There are people that want to document. There are people that just want to sit and vibe it out. There are people that, you know, want to measure and research. And we created a space for all these people, and have events for everybody, and, you know, and give them a platform so that they can, you know, talk about their own experiences, and also give the location its own platform. You know, we haven't come away from a location without something of relevance to that location. So, and we try very hard to do that, you know, to give everybody, every location, every story its place. So, for example, one of the locations in the book that we talk about, the person, I call him Caleb in the book, and it was Isaac Moore's house, and it actually was not in Jersey. It was that place was in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. You know, they were not accepted by their family, and the feelings of grief in that experience were very real, you know, to the people who we brought through, to ourselves, you know, understanding that this person was not given a space and time in history to speak their truth. And we said, that's such a shame. And we wanted to take that forward, and we wanted to make sure everybody had their own venue to speak their truth in terms of the paranormal realm.
Do you think this is something that we're getting more aware of? Because I've often found the ethical behaviour of certain investigation over the years, regardless of whether on television or not, that often the location and the witnesses and the ghosts are usually the last thing on people's minds, because the haunting seems to be more about the people doing it rather than what they're actually there for. And often they just don't care about a building's history or anything, or how they carry themselves, or even things to the way people carry themselves when they're doing an investigation, even, slamming doors and running about and banging on walls and things. Was it crucial for you guys to kind of build not only a safe space to allow people to investigate how they felt, but the way that you were liaising with these locations, that you were showing them, both the owners and the building itself and its spectral residents, the respect you felt they deserved?
Yeah, that was a game changer for us. I mean, in terms of doing that and making sure that everything is respected. It lost humanity. I mean, these locations and the people who continue to haunt, for lack of the better word, it lost its humanity. These were people's wives, sisters, brothers, mothers, lovers. They were, and I wouldn't go into your house and, say, would you get that light for me and turn it off, but this is what we do. We go into these places and you're like, can you turn off the light? And people, it's like the residents of these places that have passed are looking at you like, are you crazy? Or at least that's how we feel, that it needed the respect and the humanity brought back. For example, it's like you go to Pennhurst. Now, I talked about Pennhurst and the negative entity that is there. Because I wanted to focus on what I left with. But in terms of Pennhurst and it being a place of trauma and the residents that lived in Pennhurst, these people who were there, were disabled. Some of them were nonverbal, and a scream in a place there is not what people might think it is. It's not a scream. It's the only way the residents could communicate. Mm-hmm. Because, and to go there understanding and to not be afraid or to mock or to say, can you tell me your name? Well, no, they probably can't.
Yeah.
Because of the developmental delays that the people had there, and understanding that some of these people had their teeth removed.
Yeah.
They did bite. Well, what is biting on a very low level? It's a way of communicating.
Yeah.
I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm hungry, and it's not an aggressive communicative intent as much as it's probably only way that they could. I don't even want to call it maladaptive because it's the only thing that they had left.
Absolutely. I mean, and to be fair, like you say there, Cara, I mean, the fact that we can talk about these and you can say something like they would have had their teeth removed because it was normal.
Right.
That if you had a patient that was a bit bitey, instead of going, well, we need to find out why they're so angry, they went, let's just pull their teeth out so they can't bite us anymore. Which sometimes
it blows your mind.
I hear some of these stories, and this is not just a thing that happens in the States. Obviously, in the UK as well, Cara, there were abuses of these kind of things to patients, like you say, who were non-verbal or may have had trapped in their own bodies and couldn't, regardless of either their condition or their trauma or their upbringing, or maybe they were just too scared to talk because of how things would happen if they lived in that kind of family unit. Yeah, exactly. And so I think sometimes people forget that when they go in, like you say, it's so not necessarily ignorant. I think it shows a lack of understanding. It shows a lack of compassion, especially if you haven't even researched the location you're going to, and you go to somewhere like an asylum, and you don't look at what type of people were inmates there or patients there.
Right.
And you go in there just saying, oh, do this, do that. We have no idea if we're trying to look at the kind of realization of the paranormal being based on the physical characteristics of the person that's passed, then some people are not going to be able to do that. And I sometimes think that over the last sort of 10 years, we've seen a lot more people around the world, when they're doing such investigations, Cara, using this kind of ethical framework to be a bit more nuanced in regards to how they do hauntings, instead of just wandering around shouting, talk to me, do this, do that. There's a bit more intelligence being shown by research groups these days.
Yes, and I like to be on that part of history and research. I mean, even when you go to when we go to prisons, the language that's used, by the people who still reside there, not only the residents and the prisoners, but the people who worked there. There's a lot to be said on your interactions, and people use them. And I don't like that term. They say we use here, and I don't know what they use by you. They use trigger objects to get a response,
Mm-hmm.
But what response are we trying to get?
Mm-hmm.
The response, I went to one of the places there, Burlington County Prison Museum here in New Jersey, and I brought shackles. Now, the response from somebody who worked there is going to be much different than somebody who resided there.
Yes, obviously.
You know what I mean? One trigger object, unfortunately, there are polar opposite responses. You could get a response of authoritarianism and somebody who's on a power trip from one of the guards, from somebody who also was a resident there, that's going to meet you and greet you with anger or even fear.
Yes.
For bringing it. And you have to be sensitive to both the responses, and come from the point of view is, I want to hear your story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to feed your ego, but at the same time, I'm not here to frighten you either. I want to hear your story around said object, and what does it evoke for you as a spirit, in terms of your employ, or in terms of how you are dealing with these maybe possibly inhumane use of, say, shackles. So it's giving everybody that, and me just being a witness and understanding and documenting the story around said object, and what it does, without trying to scare anybody or trying to poke the bear, so to speak. Again, we also take care in terms of, like we said, with the people that we bring there. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of provoking. We don't provoke. We don't try to make everybody anyone angry. When I was working for another organization, it was very clear that some spirits weren't coming around, and we couldn't figure out why, because we were aware of what was there. I was at the location for a couple of days. I was at Pennhurst for a couple of days, and I was staying there for a couple of days. And one of the people in one of the groups on one of the days, they were like, they were there to be agitators. And, that's when we, as Nine Lives, said, we're not about that. We want to hear what the spirits, have to say, and we want to hear their stories. I mean, there were some people there, yes, that had intentions when they were working there. But there were other people there that were doing the best with what they were provided by the state at that time, and anywhere, and Overbrook or whatever. I mean, they didn't have the money to, they were at Pennhurst Asylum, it was redlined out of the budget to get women, the proper undergarments that they needed. They didn't have the money for it. So, it's sad, but you want to hear what the people had to say about it, the nurses, the doctors, everybody.
Do you think that your normal career given you a more empathic way of doing paranormal investigations, because obviously you work in speech therapy and you've had a long career in that? And everything you've just kind of said there is the kind of thing I would expect someone whose job needs compassion on a day-to-day basis. And everything you've kind of said about the way you guys are doing your investigations essentially says to me the kind of teacher you are, the kind of educator you are, because you work in a field where you have to try numerous kind of techniques, you have to be patient, you have to be kind, you have to not push these people, because I would imagine when you work in that particular field, once again, as we were saying about people using non-verbal communications and things like that, there will be a myriad of reasons as to why these people have problems speaking.
Correct. Yeah, it actually does make you, it drives you to have a more sympathetic ear, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Also in terms of in terms of what I do, it does make me more empathic and more intuitive to what is trying to be said with some of my harder cases, so to speak, where there not only there is a communication issue, but where that communication issue stems from. Is it from a mental health way, a mental health origin? Is it from a cognitive disability origin that they're unable to communicate? Also, in terms of paranormal, outside of my day job, I do work with an exorcist. I do, and I do, I do that, and a lot of the people that I come in contact with fall into two categories. Either they've been traumatized by what they're experiencing, or they do have a mental health issue that can look like it is an oppression or a type of possession, or a hallucination. And communication becomes a big factor in trying to get the people who are experiencing these hauntings, it becomes a big factor in getting them to talk about it, in terms of either how it affected them, or trying to get to the root cause of what is actually happening with them. There's a different technique in trying to get these people to talk about, what's going on in terms of their personal lives. And it's almost the same thing it's almost you're taking a counseling type of role, whether you're living or dead, and getting people to speak. In some of the places, even I mentioned in the book, there are some people that not only have, they were traumatized too, in terms of being, in a past life. It's hard. It's like I go to some of these places and there are sick rooms in them. In terms of even in some of the mansions, like what did we do back in the day, with people who were ill? We isolated them from the rest of the people in the house.
Yep.
Same with birthing rooms and what goes on in there. Sick rooms in terms of illness, sick rooms and birthing rooms, and how to talk to the people who occupy these spaces, and their existence. Parents who have lost children due to illness, the child that lost, their life due to illness, and I talk about some of that there, even in some of the other locations. Children who have passed away because they fell in a well, people who have passed away because they were, hit in the head by a horse. It was a child, and, or whatever, or were hit by a car. So it really brings to the living in your role changes, in the way you approach these things changes.
Very much so. I suppose as well, on the back of that as well, Cara, is it difficult sometimes when we try to be ethical and respectful when we're doing investigations, where you draw the line from something happening in the past to saying, I think this is now a location we can go and visit? I mean, over the last sort of 5 years, there's been a lot of pushback on people on a variety of social media platforms, it would seem, Cara, who are going to recent tragedies, such as a murder
Right.
or a terrible accident, and essentially trying to catch EVPs or see if they can make contact with people. And they're turning up like within a week of something terrible happening. And I'm not sure if this is a reflection of modern society more than paranormal investigators, coupled with a bit of true crime thrown into it as well, because you've got that kind of aspect to some of these situations too. Because sometimes there will be terrible things happen, and it seems often that people can just move on very quickly, it would seem sometimes. Whereas other times, depending on the location or the number of people that have passed or such like, there seems to be sort of an unspoken time that needs to pass before people do this. I mean, a prime example, people have often, I've heard people talk about this before, people on about going to where the World Trade Centers were in New York. Now, I know that there doesn't seem to be anybody who's ever sort of published or put that out there, Cara, about going and doing something like that, because clearly there is a real ethical dilemma in doing that. But I think we both would know that there will have been people who have done that privately, probably within months of those awful events occurring. So for you guys, because you've got such locations in your state, in the neighbouring states, do you have a kind of unwritten rule about things such as that? And I'm not necessarily saying such a big place as New York and the World Trade Center and the events there, but other locations from where tragedies may have happened in the 80s or the 90s, perhaps.
Yeah. I have personally an unwritten rule that there are certain places that no good can come from it. Or at least that's how I look at it. You know what I mean? It's like places like the World Trade Center, places like, where the Holocaust occurred, things that are, I don't go. Places, even places that, like plantations, places where there were true cruelty that happened, I don't go, and I just let it be. And I struggle because, do I think a lot of these stories should be told? Absolutely, in terms of from a historical perspective. But again, it goes back to also intention in terms of not only how those tragedies came to pass, but also the intention of what we're doing there. Like what is your purpose, in terms of doing the investigation? I want to give everybody a voice in terms of their own past, but at the same time, I also want to be respectful in terms of what actually did occur. And like you're even talking about true crime, I do have, a lot of great sympathy. When I go to prisons, I'm there to talk about, what occurred at the prison, but I also want to respect the victims of why the people, were there in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a very fine line. It's a very fine line. And sometimes, the respect has to be the inaction of the investigator, and knowing when to stop and knowing when to hold space for that, and knowing, and it's a very personal journey for the investigator, on top of it's a very personal journey for the place you're investigating as well, and not to make it an attraction, so to speak. Like I've actually said to people, this is not a carnival ride. This is not an amusement park. We're not here to do, these things. And again, can you shut that door? There's a humanity to all of it that has to be respected. Is there energy attached to all those places? Absolutely. And it has to be dealt with in a very ethical and responsible way. And that's personal personal to everybody. Personally, would I do it? No. But I'm not here also to tell other people what they can and cannot do. But if you're going to do it, just be very respectful to what you're, to the place that you're going.
I suppose one would suggest that probably one of those things that I think everybody kind of knows what happened, but some people seem to forget it happened in New Jersey, is the Hindenburg crash.
Absolutely.
And is one of those incredible moments in history where it's the birth of media, really, at that time.
Right.
And so you have this horrific audio commentary at the time, because it was being broadcast live on the radio, Cara. And I'm not a ghoulish person. I like to think I've got a strong stomach because I have an interest in true crime and certain aspects of that, as well as the paranormal. And I love history. And living in England, you can't walk 20 yards unless you're walking over a battlefield of some description. From one of our usual arguments between somebody who lived in the next village because we didn't like their flag or something. But that seems to be one of those places I think a lot of people just overlook it. And I'm not really sure why. That they know the Hindenburg blew up, and incredibly only 35 people died, which is one of those things. I think there was nearly 100 people on it. How only 35 people died when you see that footage is incredible. I know a lot of people were severely injured, obviously burns, but there was a few people who got out with like minor injuries, which is I just cannot get my head around.
Right.
And yet people seem to be unaware that I think it's Lakeside. Is it Lakeside it happened in?
Was it Lakeside? I think so.
Because I think there's a little marker there. But it seems to be one of the most overlooked locations, because I don't think many people remember that happened in Jersey.
No, they don't. Actually, one of my in Manchester, Lakehurst,
yes.
Not Lakehurst. Actually, one of my friends, she actually did also write a book about she wrote about the Hindenburg. And one of the places I investigated that's in the book, the New Egypt Historical Society actually has artifacts from the Hindenburg in it.
Wow.
So, and the Historical Society actually is it's very active. It's got a lot going on in there. But you're right. People do forget that has happened in New Jersey. And it's not, like you said, I don't want to be ghoulish, but unfortunately there seems to be, I don't want to use the word unfortunately, but because it's not unfortunate, it just seems to be that's what attracts people, a lot, is the ghoulish aspect of it. As opposed to the historical, aspect of it. But and you're right, people forget that that did happen here. It did happen here, and people lost their lives. And the amount of energy that's in that space between the panic and the tragedy of it all, but also, like you said, it doesn't, like I always say, look for the heroes. Because that has energy too.
Yes.
The happiness of finding your family member has lived has the same amount of energy as the tragedy and the loss. Same with the Titanic.
Yes.
I know a lot of people do a lot of investigations at the Titanic Museum, which I'm sure has a lot to uncover and discover. But I just want people to not forget that happiness has a lot of energy as well as tragedy. When people go to places like churches, I find churches very interesting to investigate, because not only do they have a lot of intention, but they also have a lot of happiness, as well as a lot of loss at the same time. You know, there are weddings, there are baptisms, you know, there are lots of celebrations that happen, as well as a lot of funerals that take place. Just not to look at places of tragedy from both lenses.
Well, yeah, I think that gets overlooked a lot. You know, as we've said there, the Hindenburg, 2/3 of the people survived. And that for me is even more remarkable than what happened. I think that, like you say, is a celebration. The heroes that ran in. I mean, there were people running into the flames to rescue people, for God's sake. This is right. It just shows you sometimes the character of people when they're faced with incredible situations. Some people want to be that hero. They just can't help themselves. They have to run in to that burning building. Right. I know you mentioned, I think the first location you mentioned in your book is the Williams Centre. Yes. Which, once again, I believe had a terrible incident in the early 70s, and it was this beautiful cultural icon in the area, and the way it was run had this long history. Once again, a place that was probably filled with laughter and happy memories for so many people, seeing all these vaudeville acts over the years, and the amounts of people who'd gone through those doors and left entirely entertained. And yet, right, like you say, there was this awful incident at the beginning of the 70s.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. That is another. That's a very interesting place too, because of, you know, who it was named after. He was such a community member. You know, William Carlos Williams, well, Dr. Williams, you know, he was a doctor. He was and it brings his family that works to keep that place in terms of his memory, you know, brings so much to the table as well as that place. And when I actually investigated that place a couple of times, you know, the descendants of William Carlos Williams actually had experiences there themselves, you know, in terms of speaking to the namesake. It was very interesting. It was very, very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously it's got it's kind of had a renaissance as well, because it seems to be one of those places that in its rebirth, it's kind of respected its past but taken it into the new century, really.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And the things that, you know, that are going on there to continue to, you know, respect its history and its legacy, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
I think one of the other places I'd like to mention is, I think this place probably gets overlooked because there's probably one of the most famous hotels in the world, has a very similar name, which is the Shanley Hotel. And I think it does itself a disservice, because when you mention it, and if you're not listening properly, you might think people are talking about the Stanley, which is an infamous location. Right. But the Shanley seems to be just as peculiar.
The Shanley, I've investigated this, and I only used one instance, but I investigated the Shanley literally a half a dozen times. And it's a very interesting place, in that it attracts so many different energies and types of people. Like it's a remarkable type of place. It's in the Hudson Valley, which the Hudson Valley, it's in its own right a lot of UFOs and a lot of different, a lot of different sightings. Infamous in that, you know, plus the history of the place itself. It has an energy about it that is bar none the most remarkable energy to experience. In that, not only does it have the tragedies of the things that happened on its property, with the deaths of children and Irish mafia and things that had, and brothels going on and gambling, but it also has a legacy of being a place of celebration. It had inaugural addresses been done there with the Roosevelts and everything. Yeah. You know, it had a lot of fanfare around it. The people who owned it would like to entertain. And they had so many, people in and out. When they got married, they had almost like a ticker tape parade in the town.
Mm.
So, it is really, it's an interesting kind of place to go to, because you really don't know what you're going to get, which energy is going to pop out, you really don't know, but it's a really cool place.
Is that part of the attraction of keeping going back then, Cara? Because every time you go back, you experience something different.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes, when we go there, it's the energy of the more, I don't want to use the word oppressive, but, the more mafioso kind of energies are there.
Yes.
Sometimes when we go, it's like the gentleman's club, and it's a partying kind of atmosphere that goes on there. Sometimes it's a more homey atmosphere when you go there, from the families that have been there, and you never really know. You really never know what you're going to get. Mm. I will tell you though, and this is just an aside, every time I go there, I get the best sleep of my life. I don't know what it is, and it is like, it's so funny to talk about, because every time I talk to people who have spent a reasonable amount of time there, they will tell you that it's the most, it is the, you will sleep hard and you sleep soundly. Yeah. It's funny. It's very funny. I'm like, and no matter what room I'm in, I could be in one of the rooms of one of the women of the night, and I could get a good night's sleep. Or I could be in the party room in the gentleman's quarters, and I get a good sleep. I've slept in different rooms in there, and every single time I have slept soundly. And there's a cat. I will tell you, if you go stay there, there's a ghost cat, and which is how really we got our name, because most of the places that we go to tend up having to have ghost cats. Mid-Orange Correctional Facility, I have a person that used to take care of the cats in the area. When you go to the Shanley Hotel, there's a ghost cat that if you sleep, you can actually feel it. Having cat, you could feel it kind of like root around and get comfortable. Yeah. in or whatever. When we went to the Conjuring House, there was a ghost cat that we saw. So, yeah. So as an aside, yeah, they have a ghost cat that will curl up in the bed with you. You could feel it. Yeah.
Hear it making biscuits as it's trying to get comfy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is great. Yeah, because I like sleeping with my pet. So, it's comforting when I'm away from home that I feel the ghost cat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm going to say, for an animal lover, I would imagine that's brilliant that even the resident ghost spirit animal fancies snuggling up.
Oh, yeah.
Surely that's the sign you passed the test, Cara, that they accept you.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. When they say, animals know, when the animal comes and sleeps on your bed, the ghost animal.
Why are so many people obsessed with the Trans-Allegheny?
I can honestly, it's one of my places that I want to but I think that people are obsessed with it because I think everybody can find a little bit of something there. It speaks to the people who did not fit in.
Yes.
At least that's what I think. And it speaks to the people that do not fit in society. And being a paranormal investigator, we're kind of like that fringy type of people.
Yep.
So I think it speaks to us. I think it speaks to us because, we are kind of like, I don't want to say on the outside, but in terms of being outside of the general population so I think it speaks to us personally.
I mean, sometimes you will find that there will be certain locations that seem to attract those of us that sometimes may feel marginalized in some way, Cara.
Yeah.
Regardless of what those reasons are. And I think when I've spoken to other people, I've spoken to a couple of people who've been to Trans-Allegheny. One found it an extremely comforting place to be. and the other had the complete opposite feeling to it. And I think sometimes this is the thing that, as you and Gail mentioned in the book, sometimes you'll do an investigation and your equipment doesn't work, or you're not getting the results you might expect, or the trigger objects aren't functioning properly. But you've still got your gut, you've still got your feelings, and therefore you know that something's happening. It's just not registering on what the normal measurements would be.
Right. And I always say too, like when we were talking about that, like some people have a really great comforting experience, some people don't. It's, sometimes too, what you put out is what you get out, what you get back.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the energy that's attracted to you for whatever reason. Not saying that you want the bejesus scared out of you, but it is what it is, which we've all, but I will say, on that note, like when I've had my change my pants moment, I didn't go into it wanting that, I wasn't going in negatively, but, I do think that sometimes when you approach a place with an attitude of hubris and you go into places, other entities will be like, well, I'll show you, so.
Yeah. Well, the last place I want to ask you about is primarily based on, I want you to pronounce this how you would say it, Cara, because I'm not even going to try and murder a Jersey accent, which is the Elk Lodge in Boonton. Now, I know for a fact that's not how you guys pronounce it.
Well, Boonton?
That's it. Brilliant. Yeah, Boonton Elk Lodge.
The Boonton Elks Lodge, yes. Well, there's other places. There's other, just to laugh. Newark?
Yeah.
How would you say how would you pronounce that? Newark.
Newark.
Say it again?
Newark.
Sorry? Yeah. Newark. We say it Nork. But anyway, the Boonton Elks Lodge is a fantastic place. I'm actually going to be going back there because I love it so much. Every Friday I'll be there. Every second Friday of the month I'll be there. But yeah, the Boonton Elks Lodge is a place that not only has history because it's so ceremonial, and I do think that a lot of ceremonies do repeat themselves residually,
mm-hmm.
and do attract some other energy. So, for example, the Boonton Elks Lodge was mainly for gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that I go in there does kind of trigger certain responses in the people that continue to haunt that place. Also, the Boonton Elks Lodge, somebody electrocuted themselves in the balcony.
Mm.
So there is some sort of residual hauntings going on from and some intelligent hauntings going on as well. So it's very, there are apparitions that are seen in it of walking in and out, and there is a feeling of oppression upstairs from, especially if women attend and go in. But it's an interesting place. It commands respect.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that it commands respect when you go there. It's one of those places that whatever is there does not mean to frighten you, but if you don't understand the regal nature of an elk and the austerity of the elks themselves when they try to live a life of service, and it could be looked at as being oppressive, but it's really not. It's being more stern. And say, this is the way you're supposed to conduct yourself in this space.
Yes.
It's It's pretty cool. I like it there.
But clearly, it seems like it's got under your skin a little bit, and that's why you're trying to go so regularly. Is it that one of those? You think it's one of those places where the more you go, the more it'll reveal to you?
Yes. There's that place, and there's another place too I mentioned in the book where I go pretty regularly, and I'm actually very good friends with the owner. Is the antique stop? It's an antique store, Times 10 Cup.
Mm-hmm.
That place, if you go more regularly, the spirits will get to know you. And I tend to hold both of those places with a deep affection. I think because one, with the antique shop, the Times 10 Cup antique shop, I hold it with a deep affection because that place really is the embodiment of life after death. With all the antiques in there, and how the person who owns the antique shop, Laurel, comes across the stuff. A lot of times people come to her after somebody has died. So the way that the stuff comes to her is usually on consignment because somebody has passed. So the antique shop itself happens to be the embodiment, like I said, of life after death. Now, whether the energy is attached to those things or it is attached to the shop itself, because the shop itself is next to a church, whether there's, again, that energy there, it's very interesting, and I hold it close to my heart. Now, the Elks the same way, because of all the service that they do for the community and for veterans.
Yep.
And for people who, they also help disabled children a lot, also holds a place in my heart in terms of, what goes on there and what their service organization is. So, yeah. Brilliant. It's gotten under my skin. I go there a lot. So, like I said, I go there the second Friday of every month, and I do things there with the Elks.
Brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. A bit of giving back and a bit of paranormal investigation on the sly.
Absolutely.
Well, before I let you leave, Cara, what is one place in Jersey that you think people need to know more about as a haunted location that we've not touched on?
Oh, boy. I think Carney Cottage is actually a place that people don't know about. The Carney Cottage it was owned by a Revolutionary War shipman, and it holds a lot of history. The place itself, the cottage was moved 4 times from its original location, because, of course, as things develop, and areas develop, people don't want to lose the history. So what did they do is they move the house. So it's moved 4 times. So I really suggest people go check it out. It has a lot of the historical artifacts from the Revolutionary War, the shipman times, or whatever you want to, maritime stuff. It's very interesting. I'm actually giving a lecture on it in a couple of weeks, because I did another investigation there, and they want me to present. So
fantastic. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, Cara, thank you so much for joining me. As you mentioned earlier on, obviously your book Out of the Darkness into the Light is out everywhere where people can find it, but this seems to be the first of 2 this year. So is the second book building on some of the experiences and locations that you've given us in the first one, or is it something a little bit different? Where are you and Gail going next with this?
Well, this one is actually a little bit. It is a little bit different. What happened was we did around the holidays. We did a lecture on Dickens and the Ghosts of Christmas Past. And what we did is we went out on a limb and we compared the Dickens story to a three card tarot pull. Like I told you, I was the rap tarot reader, which actually isn't my big thing, believe it or not. But anyway, so we compared Dickens to the 3-card tarot pull. And so we decided to take a deep dive into Victorian era authors and how spiritualism affected them in their writing. So we did a book highlighting certain authors and how spiritualism affected them. So we do have Dickens in there. We have Nathaniel Hawthorne in there.
Yes.
We have Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in there, which actually I just found out that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle thought that the curse of Tutankhamun, King Tut, he felt that it was haunted by elementals. So yes. So anyway, so we take a lot of the authors, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Robert Browning, obviously Edgar Allan Poe. We talk about all these people and how spiritualism affected all their writings and what events even led up to in their life led them to their affinity towards spiritualism.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah, thank you.
Especially, it's always good to hear Hawthorne get some more publicity, because he seems to be the lost Gothic author of late 19th century America. I'm amazed how few people know about Hawthorne. I mean, as far as I'm aware, Cara, there's a statue of him in Salem, Massachusetts, for God's sakes, which was his home location. Him and Elizabeth Montgomery, obviously.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, we've got family who live in Canada just over the border. So they go to, she goes to Salem once a year. She always goes there. And so the last time she went, I said, can you find me the Hawthorne statue and take a picture? Because I've read some of his books and I've seen some of the films he did with Vincent Price starring in them, like Thrice Told Tales and the like.
Yeah.
And so I'm mystified as to why he seems to be so overlooked these days. It's almost as if, especially because he came after Poe, you would think that America would hold him to their bosom as much as Poe, but Poe seems to have been completely elevated way beyond Hawthorne, and most people don't even know who he is these days.
No, you're absolutely right. And I don't want to date myself, but I read Hawthorne in school, and I loved reading his books. Not to say anything against Poe or anything, because Gail loves Poe, and I love Poe too. But and believe it or not, we have Poe stuff over here in our home. But he really, I don't think was given what he deserved in terms of his writings and his impact.
Yeah,
I don't. But people, I don't think they know that Hawthorne was related to some of the people who were in part of the witch trial.
Yes, fabulous. So when are you guys hoping to get that released?
Hopefully within the next couple of months. We just did this one, so I would say within the next 4 months, maybe even 3, we'll have the second one out. So
fabulous. I look forward to reading that as well, based on your first book.
That one is called The Pen and the Planchette.
Ah, excellent. I like the title.
Thank you.
Well, Cara, thank you so much for spending some time with me. Where can everybody follow you online, get a copy of this book, keep an eye out for the new one, and anything else you've got coming up?
Awesome. I will tell you. So you can find the book on Amazon. On Amazon. You can find me at 9livesparanormal.com. You can email me at, get this, 9livesparanormal@gmail.com. We're in conjunction with a director, so we're going to be in a documentary on actually one of the locations in the book, Time Tins Cup, and we're putting together a convention and even a film festival. So if you go on Film Freeway and you have a paranormal documentary or a paranormal short film that you want to share, please submit it. We will show it, and and you can win some fabulous prizes, trophies. Come and do a location, speak. It'll be great.
Fabulous. When are you planning to get that out there then?
That is going to be on October 4th. So it does say that somebody has to be available to speak, but that's okay if you submit from overseas, because we will Skype you through.
Yes.
So so we will Skype you through, so we could show your film entry, and at the same time, we could have you present on your film.
Mm. Oh, fabulous! Was that based off the back? Because I know you've done something previously, haven't you? You kind of did like a paranormal bazaar raising funds for a local charity as well. Was that last year?
Yeah, that was last year. We did actually do it for the Elks.
Ah.
And some of the proceeds also will be going also towards the Elks. And even when I go on the Fridays, when I said I was going to be there every second Friday, yep, it goes to the Elks to help raise funds to keep them open, because I want to keep all these historical places open.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So
they're vitally important.
Yeah, they are. So.
Well, you must have had a great success doing the first one, because if it hasn't put you off and you want to do another one, then it did the job.
It's like traumatic bonding. Like putting it all together and trying to organize everything. It's kind of like, oh.
Yeah. Once you get through the trauma, you think, oh, I had a great time.
I had a great time, yeah. So actually, when people going forward will investigate and I come through, I'll be sitting there going, oh, you know.
Yeah, you and Gail can have a couple of bottles of wine and go to the Portuguese restaurant around the corner and think, thank God that's over.
Yeah, right.
Well, listen, I want to wish you both the best. I know Gail couldn't join us through work, but I hope we get an opportunity to speak again in regards to the new book. Wow. It'd be lovely to speak to you both. And I just want to say thank you again for taking your time to guide me and my listeners around some of your favourite locations in New Jersey. And I just wish you the very best with your upcoming festival, and we will speak soon.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.